No, it's too long. Prerequisite.
Prereq skill for tomorrow. We need to know how to do this, okay? All right, if you have 2x minus 3y equals 6, and I said solve for y, that means you have to really understand how to solve equations and the steps that are involved, whether it's just numbers or whether it's just letters. The ultimate goal when you're trying to solve for a variable is to get it by itself, correct?
Correct.
Which means that we need to, first off, make sure it's on one side of the equal sign. And then we need to get rid of everything else by doing what? The opposite. If something's being added, we're going to subtract. If something's being multiplied to it, we're going to divide. If something's being divided, we're going to multiply. If it's being squared, we're going to take the square root. If it's under a square root, we're going to square it. Okay? So those rules don't change no matter how many letters are involved. If we are trying to solve for y, we want y by itself. So I've got to start by isolating this term that contains y. Okay, well, what is next to the term that contains y? 2x, specifically a positive 2x. Is it multiplied by 3y?
No.
There's no plus sign, but it's essentially being added to it. Okay, so what's the opposite of a positive 2x? I have to subtract 2x. And remember, what we do to one side, we must do to the other. So what we have left is negative 3y is equal to 6 minus 2x. Now I need to get y by itself. What's happening to it? It's being multiplied by negative 3. So I do the opposite and I divide by negative 3 on both sides. And you have isolated y. Now here we need to remember when we're multiplying and dividing polynomials. Can you simply reduce right here? No, because this shows that I have a group. The entire difference of those two things is what's being divided by negative 3. And unless I can reduce 6 and 2 and 3, then it's done. So here would be your answer. Okay? Now take the same equation and solve for x. So start again with 2x minus 3y equals 6. And solve for x. This is what you should have. Because you're going to start by adding 3y to both sides and then dividing both sides by 2. Okay? Now, on the bottom of that page, I want you to do numbers 77 through 81. And you're going to stumble through them and you're going to have questions, but I want you to seriously think about what's happening, how do I undo it? What am I trying to get by itself? How can I do that mathematically? And then we're going to go over them together. Okay, let's look at what you got. Let's check to see what you did, and then we'll go over them. You need to make sure you know how to do this for tomorrow's lesson, or else you're going to be really confused. Because this is a skill that should be mastered. Anybody get all 5 right? Thomas? Thomas? You let me down. Who did? You did?
Yeah.
Good job.
Nice.
Good job.
Eat it, Thomas.
I can give you something, girl. Let me give you. I can give you a tissue paper. Okay. Let's go through. Let's say which one's that one?
78.
All right, number 77 I think was pretty simple. Number 78, if you were trying to solve for x, okay. If you want to get x by itself, the problem we're facing right now is that x is in two terms. And we need to get it down to one term. But we can't add 3x plus 7xy because it's not alike. So we need to find some other way to get x into a single term, and it's called factoring a greatest common factor. Because both of these terms contain an x. And if you factor it out, that's what you're left with. And so now if x is being multiplied by this group, and you want to isolate x, what's the opposite of multiplying by the group? You divide by the group. On both sides. And the whole group cancels. Okay, so from the very beginning, if you have x in more than one term, and you're trying to get it into a single term, and you can't add them, then you've got to factor it out in order to get it by itself. Okay, the next one I have up here was number 79. Does anybody know what that equation is for?
Could it be x equals -2 over 7y all times 1/6?
No. Not the same thing. Okay, this is the formula for interest. Interest earned or interest owed on money. Where capital I is the actual dollar amount of the interest, P is the principal. Meaning if you go to the bank and you borrow $10,000, that's your principal. You're not going to pay back $10,000. You'll probably pay back about $15,000. All right? And the $5,000 would be your capital I, your interest that you paid back. Or little r is the interest rate. Like if you say, hey, I'm going to loan you $10,000 at 10%. That's your interest rate. And then T is how long? For 3 years. Okay? And that calculates for you the interest. This is simple interest calculation, not compounded interest. Anybody know what compounded interest is? It means you pay interest on your interest. Compounded interest means it's usually compounded monthly, which means let's say you borrow $10,000. They calculate the interest for 1 month. Let's say it's $5. At the end of that month, if you're not paying anything on it, you now owe $10,005. So the next month you start here, and they calculate interest on $10,005. So compounded interest is you pay interest on top of interest. Every loan that you make a house loan, it's compounded interest. If you borrow money to buy a house, you borrow money to buy a car, you get a credit card, all of that is compounded interest. If anybody ever offers you money to be borrowed and they say simple interest, you better jump on it. Like big time. Because simple interest means they just calculate one interest and that's it. It doesn't keep growing upon itself. Now if you're saving money, compounded interest is a good thing to have. Because you're earning interest on interest. Okay? But anyway, that's just a little financial lesson. Take that to the bank. Okay, now what were we trying to solve for? T. All right. You want to get T by itself. What's P doing to T? Multiplication. What's R and T doing? Being multiplied. What's the opposite of multiplying? All right, so we're going to divide by P and we're going to divide by R. So T was equal to interest divided by principal times rate. Okay, that one was pretty easy. Number 80. What's that the formula for? Celsius to Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit to Celsius. It's a conversion.